every single piece of recorded music since the dawn of time is available somewhere on YouTube or Spotify or something. So you're not competing with the band down the street anymore. You're competing with Prince and Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley.
Hey everybody, we are back. This is Words of Fang Interviews at the Between the Waves Music Conference, btwmadison.com. Check it out. It's in June. It's in Madison, Wisconsin. You missed it this year. That's okay. Come next year. It is in June. And of course, if you want to see all of the interviews that we've done, completely uncut, unfiltered, knowledge comes straight to your noggin, drop us a buck at Patreon, patreon.com/Lords of the Trident. We're going to be having all of the interviews posted on our Patreon uncut. The stuff that you're seeing here public is, is cut down. You're taking the best tidbits and we're saving them for the Patreon. So Between the Waves has a bunch of amazing, fantastic speakers. And we have a doozy today. We have a wonderful, fantastic speaker, a titan of the industry, Mr. Craig Anderton.
Hi,
oh
Ty.
my gosh, I'm so excited to sit down with you.
Hi, Ty. and let me add, BTW is great. I have a perfect attendance record here. I'll be here next year.
Excellent, excellent. So for the people who are not familiar with Craig Anderton, can you give us a little bit of background on you? All of your accomplishments and such.
Well, I do a lot of different things. I mean, I was a session musician in the 70s. I toured in the 60s. I played Carnegie Hall. I've invented things. Steinberg and Motu virtualized one of my hardware modules. I've written over 36 books, over 1,000 articles, mastered hundreds of tracks. I don't know how many. I've mastered hundreds of tracks. I've played on produced more than 20 albums. And those projects range from classical harpsichord all the way to like hardcore German electronic stuff. I played in Germany for quite a while with Reisdorf Force, German experimental group, and also guested with Air Liquide. I work a lot with Brian Hardgroove from Public Enemy. We do production stuff. And we had a band together at one point called EV2, which was him playing drums and me playing guitar, and it was a hex guitar, so I was articulating all the parts on the guitar because I was trained classically, so I could do fingerstyle stuff. So that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I co-founded Electronic Musician Magazine, edited EQ. I've been doing Harmony Central, do a lot of consulting to companies and manuals and things like that. So
that's amazing. A
lot of different stuff.
That's incredible. I want to hear that harpsichord album now, or that harpsichord track.
Okay, I got to tell you something about the harpsichord, and this is relevant to to people wanting to get out of the garage or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a typical way to record classical harpsichord. Classical harpsichord is a soft instrument. It sort of tinkles in the background, and so the traditional thing is you set up an XY mic and you aim it at the harpsichord, and it sounds like every other harpsichord recording you've ever heard. Well, the lady I was working with is named Kathleen McIntosh, and she's not only an incredible harpsichord player, but to her, classical music is not a museum piece. With her, it's like Bach came over that day and said, "Kathy, I got this great song you got to check out," and she plays it like it just was invented yesterday. And you hear all that beautiful harmonic work and stuff like that, and it just really. It takes classical music out of the classroom type of thinking, the academic world, and it turns into like a vital musical form like it was at the time. You know what I mean? And so I said, Kathleen, I've always wanted to close mic a harpsichord. So the guy who was the executive producer on the project was like, well, I don't know about that, And so I said, well, look, let's try an experiment. So I did the traditional miking. And then I did the way that I wanted to mic it, which was like rock and roll piano, two mics on the soundboard, close mic'd. And I brought Kathleen in, I didn't tell her which was which, I played them both. I said, which one do you prefer? And without a millisecond of hesitation, that one, that's what a harpsichord sounds like. That's what it sounds like when I'm playing a harpsichord. And it almost sounds electronic. It almost sounds like some crazy DX7 patch or something because it picks up the mechanics. The only problem was that it picked up all the hammer noises and stuff, so there was a lot of editing involved. And I didn't get rid of them, I just brought them down a little bit in volume. But the harpsichord just sounded fantastic, and a lot of that is that thinking outside of the box type of thing. And it sold a lot of copies. I mean, it was a very good class. It got great reviews. I mean, no one ever said, I think the people reviewing it weren't aware of rock and roll miking techniques. So they didn't say, oh yeah, he mic'd it like a rock and roll piano. They just said, harpsichord sounds great, you know?
There you go. Yeah.
So it's the moral of that story is you got to carve out a unique sound no matter what you're doing. You have to do something that's different, because otherwise, if I hadn't done that, it would be one of, 4,000 harpsichord Bach albums that would be just like the other ones, except played better.
Right.
You know.
So I think it's probably an understatement to say that, since you began in the music industry till today, there's been a little bit of change, right? A little bit of change, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm wondering your perspective, especially from the technology and from the mixing side of things. What are some salient points that jump out at you where you think it's much better today than it was 30, 40 years ago or whatever, And what are some salient points where you're saying, well, maybe it was a little bit better back in the day? Is there anything that kind of jumps out?
Yeah. Technologically speaking, everything's better today.
Yeah.
I have no romance with tubes. I have no romance with tape. I really don't. And a lot of the reasons why people like things is for the wrong reasons. Like they'll say, oh, amp sims, they sound terrible. I like my tube amp. No, they don't like the tube amps. They like the cabinet that's being the low pass filter above for 5 kHz on down. So all the crap that the tube produces, which is considerable, you never even hear. Whereas the amp sim, which is emulating the tube, reproduces that crap perfectly. And so you have to tame it inside the computer the way that a real cabinet tamed the sound back in the day. People talk about, tape, it had this sort of magical sound. A lot of times it wasn't the tape, it was the input transformers on the consoles that really made the difference. And there was one time I was visiting Wendy Carlos, switched on Bach, and she had one of these ancient, it was one of the first digital tape recorders. It was done by Akai. It was pre-ADAT. And I'd heard them, and they sounded not that great. Hers sounded great. It sounded great. I'm like, so Wendy, what's the deal? Oh, I put transformers at the input of the mixer. Transformers are a unique signal processor. They add sort of a distortion in the low end. They're fantastic for bass. A lot of the console emulator software you get these days, if it doesn't emulate the input transformer, it's not going to give you the sound you want. So there's a lot of the mystique about this stuff. Or like someone who goes out and wants to find a Neumann microphone from 1952 or something like that, some vintage microphone, and so they find one and they pay $40,000 or whatever because they would never buy just a copy of a Neumann, And then they find out that the diaphragm started to deteriorate after about 20 years and that the copy's way better. So there's a lot of mythology around this stuff. I would never want to go back to tape. I can get the sound of tape with digital. I can get guitar sounds with amp sims that are better than traditional amplifiers. I don't want to use traditional amplifiers. They don't sound as good. You can't process them in multiple bands and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I would not. I really can't think of anything of the back in the day that was better than what we have now. I mean, people talk about Pultec equalizers. I loved the sound of Pultec equalizers. I was there when they were like hardware units that were actually new products, and they sounded great. But so did the emulations of them. It's just backing off on the curve. It's like I was talking to someone who has Studio One, and he's like, "Oh, I really need to get I really want to get a Pultec, EQ to complement the one that's bundled with the program." And I'm like, you can get that sound with the one that's bundled in the program. Just turn the Q down and turn down the amount of boost, and you'll get the same thing. And he was like, "Oh no, but the Pultec it had." I said, No, it doesn't. And so I created a curve that was exactly the same. Now, the Pultec used inductors, which is subtly different. So you stick your input transformer emulator in front of the EQ, and you're good to go. Now, what we have lost, which is a real shame, is the interaction aspect. Like, we had sessions booked before the Hendrix Electric Ladyland sessions. So we'd come into the session and Hendrix would be mixing and the guys from Traffic would be sitting there and we'd be talking about stuff, and I would watch Hendrix mix and, use his flanging setup on our album and that kind of stuff. And you can't do that anymore, in this as easily. That was the way it was.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it was possible to make a living as a musician in a local market. Boston had a music scene, Detroit had a music scene, Philadelphia had a music scene. We were a house band in Philadelphia, and we were playing 6 nights a week, every week somewhere, either as a house band or a gig we got in Boston or a gig we got in the Midwest somewhere or whatever, and could make a really nice living doing that. And that's very difficult to do these days.
So what advice would you give somebody who says, okay, I want to do music full time, since that has changed? What's your first response to somebody who says, I want to do music full time?
Good luck. No, seriously.
That is a good response.
A couple things. Number one is one thing that's maybe not as much known about me is I do a lot of futurism. So like before Napster even existed, I wrote a piece about how in the future all music was going to be downloaded digitally into the home and physical objects would cease to exist. And that was considered kind of radical at the time. And in 1981, I gave a paper at the AES that said about EDM, that EDM was going to become the dominant musical form at some point. So I'm always trying to look into the future, and that's a prelude to the answer. What's really changed is that you got to remember that music has only been able to be frozen in time and preserved for a little over 100 years.
Right.
Music was always ephemeral, live performance. If you missed Beethoven's Fifth, you missed Beethoven's Fifth. You know what I mean? You had to show up there. You had to be at the concert hall. And when people came to you the next day and said, my God, that was an amazing experience, you're like, oh, well, okay, cool.
Yep.
Whereas now, every single piece of recorded music since the dawn of time is available somewhere on YouTube or Spotify or something. So you're not competing with the band down the street anymore. You're competing with Prince and Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley. I mean, if you want to, you can dig back. You're competing with Artie Shaw on the clarinet, and nobody knows who Artie Shaw is, but if you listen to his clarinet playing, he was like the Eric Clapton of the clarinet, and you can pick up some great solo ideas by listening to him, or some of the swing bands, the Benny Goodmans of this world, John Coltrane, amazing stuff, Miles Davis. Miles Davis is a complete course on how to make the minimal amount of sound have the most impact, All this stuff is out there. Plus, we've added all these genres. We've added EDM, we've added hip hop, we've added rap. And, a lot of people are dismissive of newer types of music. Oh, I would never listen to rap. It's like, well, I would never listen to 90% of any genre of music. But there's that 10% that's incredible, no matter what kind of music you're listening to. So that's who you're competing with. A lot of times, record companies were always like, they were looking for the next Springsteen or the next Michael Jackson. They don't have to do that anymore, because you can listen to Springsteen or Michael Jackson 24 hours a day if you want. So the first thing I tell people is, you have to be original. You have to be doing something that nobody else is doing. That's number one, or you're not even going to get in the door. Because if your music comes on and it sounds like something else, why bother listening to it? But if your music comes on, it's like something they've never heard before. It's like, whoa, what was that? I mean, if you think back to the first time when Hendrix first appeared, now so many people have copied him since then that it doesn't have the same kind of impact. But back then, no one had done that before. And so within the first 10 seconds of Jimi Hendrix's first album, you knew that either aliens had landed or an entirely new musical form had been invented, So that's number one. So number one is you have to come up with something unique. That's the first gating element. The second gating element is it has to be something that people want to listen to. And that's not as easy as it sounds, because if you think about it, with a population, we have like 400 million in this country, 375, something
like that. Yeah.
So if it used to be if someone bought 1 million copies of something, that was a big deal. But look at the percentage of the population that is. That's tiny. So all the rest of those, 99.0 or 99.77% of the people didn't care for it enough to buy it. So you're targeting a pretty small. Music is so subjective, that not everybody's going to like everything, and people are going to like different things for different reasons and all that. So the other advice I give people is you have to be yourself. You can't be calculating about what people are going to like, because if you're yourself and you do what you really love to do and what comes naturally, that doesn't guarantee success. People may hate it, but at least you get to do it. And if people,
at least you'll like it.
At least you'll like it. Your friends will like it, And if you do something that resonates with people and it does become popular, then you have a career because you have not faked anything. There's no artifice involved. If you're you, you can keep doing you forever and people will respond. One of the people in the listening panel yesterday, 20-year-old kid, okay, and his song stuck out to me as like, I would listen to that. That's that was new, that was fresh, it was something different. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, okay, I'm about to give you the best piece of advice you're ever going to get. He said, what's that? I said, don't listen to any advice. Just, you're on the path, you know what you're doing, just do you. 10 years from now, you're going to be awesome. So just leave it at that, you know? But the other thing too is that music is now a calling card for other things in a way. So I have a YouTube channel. And I have like 1,400 subscribers.
What's the YouTube channel?
YouTube.com/The Craig Anderton.
The Craig Anderton.
There you go. And unfortunately, Craig Anderton was taken, so I had to be pretentious about it. I didn't want to have Craig Anderton 6729 or something, you know. Anyway, but I would do music if nobody listened to it. It's a biological necessity for me. I'm a musician. I do music. Now, I've done some music that's done really, really well. And I've done some music that hasn't done well at all, but it's always been real, and I've always enjoyed doing it. And I've actually, at some points in my life, I've made a lot of money from music. At some points in my life, I haven't made any money from music. But I keep doing it. And what's interesting about what I'm doing now with music is that it's actually, people listen to the music and they go, oh, I like that sound, and then they see that I write books about how to get good mixes and how to do mastering and stuff like that. So they end up buying the books, even though they're getting the music for free on YouTube. Or I did a video of the Helix Line 6, the Line 6 Helix, the preset patches, and I put that online. And all these people are buying my presets, but they're also being exposed to my music. And I've noticed that since I've put that online, there's a lot more of the other stuff getting clicks too. So it used to be, see, I don't promote this stuff really. I mean, I'll mention it at a seminar, but 100 people in a room or something like that, it's not going to take over the world.
Right.
But you do it one person at a time. You know, you get your fan base, and you do everything you can to reach as many people as you can in as many ways as you can. Like I have a Twitter account. I would say that most of the people who subscribe to my Twitter account, I don't put music, I mean, I will link to my music on there, but every month, the first week of every month, I put out a nag that people should back up their data. You know, it's the first week of the month, have you backed up your data? It's the only part of the computer that you can't replace, you know? And I just can't fathom musicians who come to me and say, oh, my hard disk crashed, I lost everything. That's your fault. That's not the computer's fault. That's not the hard disk's fault. So people subscribe to my Twitter feed, not to find out what new music I'm doing, but to be reminded to back up their data. And it gets more retweets than anything else. But then if they go one or two tweets different, oh, he does music too. You know, they just might click on it. So it used to be when I put a new video up on YouTube, a month later it'd have like 100 clicks or, And now when I put a new thing on, it's got like 700 or 800, So it's all, you gotta be patient. You gotta be true to yourself. You gotta be different. You gotta enjoy doing it. Now, that's another thing about live performance. People are saying, well, what can we do to really connect in a live performance?
What can you do to upgrade?
Have fun. Have fun. The band should be having fun. If the band is having fun, the audience will have fun. It's that simple. It really is that simple. If you're sitting up there thinking, judging was that lead good or whatever? Nobody cares. They want to have a good time. And if you're having a good time, it's infectious. So be true to yourself, have a good time. I mean, what's wrong with that, right?
That's some amazing, great wisdom there. Yeah.
But I'll tell you another thing too, which is I had a seminar which I kind of really wanted to do here, but maybe I'll do it next year, and it's called How to Make Money in the Music Business Without Being a Superstar. And like one of the examples I gave, a couple of people took this to heart. I said, you want to make music? Okay. Are you willing to make music that's not like your music, but it's just like the fun of making music. Oh yeah, sure, great. I said, so here's what you do. You watch late night TV until you see a local business that has a commercial with a horrible soundtrack. Bob's Used Cars or whatever. And you go to Bob and you say, I'll give you a really good, I saw your commercial, I'll give you a really good soundtrack and I'll give it to you for free. And if you want to use it, use it. And if you don't, don't. But I just think you need a better soundtrack for that commercial. Well, Bob's not going to say no to something free. I mean, he sells used cars, right?
Yeah.
So he goes, okay. And so you give him the soundtrack and he runs it. So then you go to company B that also has a bad commercial. And you say, hey, listen to this thing that I did for Bob's used cars. Oh, that sounds pretty good. I'll do it for you for free. And they go, oh, yeah, sure, great. So then you do that one. Now you have 2. So now you go to the third company and you say, hey, listen to the soundtrack I did for the local tropical fish place and for Bob's used car. I'll do one for you, same kind of quality for $500. Okay, sure, yeah, 500, no problem. You know, I spent $4,000 on that commercial, and I wasn't really happy with it. You know, and then you go to company 4, and it's $750, and then at that point you're in demand, and now people are starting to find out about you because they went to Bob and they said, "Wow, your commercials are so much better." Yeah, there's this kid who came out, he gave you free, you know. So there are things like that. There's teaching things. There's sample libraries. I was talking to a cello player yesterday, and he was like, you know, how do I do something with this? And I said, well, if you're playing a cello, there are a limited number of cello sample libraries, but there's an even more limited number of effects done with cellos, string scrapes and things like that. And I said, that'll get your name out there as something, you know, it's not getting your music out there, but it's getting your name out there. And if, you know, all it takes is for one horror movie to use that cello string squeak at the climactic scene, and then all of a sudden now you're going down an entirely different path. And then you start putting out your music, and it's all synergistic. The other thing that I would say is, and I hate to say this, but it's reality. The most important part of your music is marketing. It has nothing to do with the music. It has to do with the marketing, because you have to rise above the noise, and the noise level is huge these days.
Yeah.
Huge. I mean, it used to be the record companies were filters, and you would be, you know, they would receive hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of submissions, and they go, well, we like this one or we like this other one. And there were companies like CBS that just threw a bunch of stuff and saw it succeeded, but there were others that were more selective, like Island Records or Windham Hill. Windham Hill was like a new age label. If you liked one Windham Hill album, you probably liked other Windham Hill albums. You know, they were like, you know, solo pianos doing wispy things. If you liked island music, if you liked Bob Marley and you like, you know, Caribbean stuff, if you liked one island, you probably liked the others. We really don't have that anymore. And the other thing that I find frankly kind of objectionable is I do everything I possibly can to not respond to the questions that websites throw to you to give you similar content. I don't want similar content. Oh, you like Led Zeppelin? Here's some more heavy metal bands. No, I don't want more Led Zeppelin. I like Led Zeppelin. Give me something I haven't heard before. Right. So like yesterday when I was doing that thing about breaking the rules of EDM, one of the things I did was play like 6 or 7 audio examples of African, Caribbean, French Antilles music that's dance music as much as any EDM is, but from an entirely different perspective, you know, different kind, even some of the same instrumentation. But it's just, and I've started incorporating that into my music. I've started incorporating EDM elements into rock. I've started incorporating rock into one of the reasons why I did all my gigging over in Germany with the electronic groups was I was playing guitar. And it was like a novelty, like, who's the old guy with the guitar, you know?
We're all playing synthesizers. Why is this man with the pointy strings? What's going on?
But the thing is that I was doing it all through an adrenaline, so it was all synced to the MPC that was the main brains of the whole thing. So it was this incredibly rhythmic, filtered sound. It sounded synthetic, but it didn't sound fake. It sounded really organic. It had the guitar quality, and I could take a beer bottle and slide it up and down the strings, you know, and do things and do feedback. Try doing feedback with a synthesizer, you know. And I've actually come up with a way to do feedback with synthesizers and patches, but that's a whole other thing.
Why am I not surprised?
I love feedback. And when I hit a key, I want there to be feedback if I'm holding it down and it's sustaining, you know. If something's sustaining, by golly, it should have feedback in there somewhere. So, you know, so I carved out this whole additional weird career doing electronic music stuff over in Germany because I played guitar. You know, we did a thing that was we did a major concert in Cologne where the Cologne station was like videoing it, and they spent most of their time on me because I wasn't sitting behind a box. I was playing a guitar. You know, nobody in the band minded. I mean, they thought that was kind of cool. It's like a calling card for them. But again, I was true to myself. I didn't try I mean, I can play synthesizer, but they had great synthesizer players. But I played guitar, and I played guitar the way I like to play guitar, which is a lot of rhythm stuff. And there was a home for that.
Yeah, as someone who is, a titan in the technology and recording side of things, this may be a bit of a loaded question, or maybe maybe a big question. If somebody came to you and they said, "Hey, I want to start recording my own music. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to begin. What is the bare minimum that I need to start making stuff that sounds halfway decent in my bedroom?"
That's not enough information.
Oh, okay.
First of all, they need to buy all my books, but no, are they making beats? Are they Mac? Are they Windows? Are they rock? Are they doing audio for video? Do they want to do sound design stuff more for film? Are they a singer-songwriter? There's like a zillion questions because it's going to guide them different ways. Like if they're mostly,
let's say they're a metal band.
If they're a metal band, okay, well that actually simplifies things.
Okay.
First of all, you need a computer. But you don't really need a computer. You can just get a Tascam Model 24. It depends. Do you want to go down the computer rabbit hole? Do you need to do editing? Do you need to use plugins? Do you need to modify your sound? Or are you mostly after a live sound that you've honed over the years? Then you can just go into the inputs of your Model 24s and call it good. And that's like, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's basically a giant mixer that records.
Oh, okay.
So it's like if you want to play live with your band, just plug everybody in, and if you need to edit something, you can always bounce a track out and bounce it back in again. And I know there's a guy I work with over in England. I've covered some of his songs. He's a fantastic songwriter. He records everything into this little Korg thing and generates MP3s.
Really?
But his stuff sounds fantastic because his songs are so good. It could be recorded on anything, and the songs are just so good that it just doesn't matter. So that's one option. If you're going to if you need to do editing, if you need plugins, if you need to get a more radio-ready sound,
sure.
If you need to do mastering, that's a whole other thing. If you're planning on doing albums, collections of songs, that's something. So, for example, if you're wanting to do straight ahead recording, you don't want to have to spend a lot of money, so you want something that comes bundled with a lot of plugins. You also want to do your own mastering because you want to put stuff out either as a digital release on your website as MP3s or FLAC or whatever, but you maybe want to burn some CDs for the merch table, kind of thing. And you've acquired a taste for EDM that's not with your main band, but you'd like to be able to do some kind of EDM-ish stuff when no one's looking.
Sure.
So if those are your requirements, I say get Studio One, because it has a mastering page on it that's really clever, and it's the only program that does it where you can be mastering a collection of songs, and if song number 7 comes along and you go, oh, the vocal's too soft, you can hit a button, go into the song itself, make that change, hit another button, it renders it back to the master. And
Interesting.
So, but if you have no interest in and it makes CDs and it does digital releases, and it also does DDP exports if you want to go to disc makers and get 1,000 CDs made for your fan base, and that's ideal for that, But on the other hand, if you say, well, I'm doing a lot of collaboration with like 3 or 4 different people, and we're, like they do the vocals and they do this, well, the probably the most used program out there is Pro Tools. It's not necessarily the most capable by any means, but it's good for that. On the other hand, if you came to me and you said, I'm totally into EDM and I really love the live experience, I love playing live, but I want to be able to put that stuff in the studio as well. I want to be able to work in the studio. I'd say, get Ableton Live.
Yeah, I was going to say Ableton Live. Everybody I know who does EDM uses all Ableton Live.
Now, that's not the only option, but that's a really good option. And the other thing is it has an audio engine that just won't quit. It's all optimized for never screwing up live. Now, that makes it less capable in the studio for some things, but it's an extremely capable program in the studio as well. It's just oriented that way.
Gotcha.
So it really depends on what you want to do.
Okay.
Like one final piece of advice, you're a singer-songwriter, so you want to buy an audio interface. So you say, well, I really only need 2 inputs. I need a 2 in, 2 out. I need one for the mic and one for the guitar. Well, do you also play bass? Well, yeah. How many guitars do you have? Well, I have a Les Paul, I have a Strat, and then I have an acoustic guitar. Okay. And what do you use? Do you use any kind of rhythmic back? Well, yeah, I have a drum machine and I can play little keyboards. Okay. Now you need a 20 input interface so that they're all patched in, all ready to go at the same time. So you're not just moving patch cords around all the time.
Right.
So you spend an extra $200, you get an interface with all those inputs, and now you've just saved yourself $200 of time 1,000 times over. So there's little sneaky things like that you might not think about.
Gotcha.
Or there are some interfaces that are actually mixers, like the PreSonus mixers have USB ports. QSC has a really nice mixer with a USB port and stuff like that. So a Tascam. So there you go. You can take that same mixer, use it as an audio interface, take it out to the gigs, mix your band with it. So you really have to define. I've often dreamed that it would be great to create the checklist of all times, which would be a computer program where you would specify all the things you wanted to do and say, get this.
Yep. Well, I could listen to you talk all day. This is absolutely amazing. I know you've got a panel coming up, so I won't keep you very much longer. Let the people know where they can find you. Let them know the links to your books, maybe.
Okay. The main nerve center is CraigAnderton.com.
CraigAnderton.com.
And I'm not the kind of person who wants to win the update wars. It doesn't get updated all. It only gets updated when there's something new and interesting.
Okay.
So like, you check back once every few weeks and you'll know if something's happening. YouTube.com/TheCraigAnderton. That's the place for the music and the instructional videos, and that's actually worth subscribing to, because you never know when something's going to show up. And you don't want to have to check back, because I just put up a new song a few weeks ago and I just finished another one now, and that's going to go up. So sometimes it'll be like months between songs, sometimes it'll be a few days.
Yeah.
So it's subscribe to that. The books are available from HalLeonard.com. Okay. And a very exciting development in my life is I'm opening up a digital storefront on Reverb.com. I'm sort of like the proof of concept for them. And so you'll be able to buy my books in electronic versions. You'll be able to buy the patches for the Line 6 for the Helix. You'll be able to buy sample libraries, all these things that I have a lot of products out there. The other thing is that I've been writing a series of Studio One specific books that are available on PreSonus.com, but they'll be available on my website, on my Reverb site now. Yeah. And I wrote another book called the Huge Book of Cakewalk by BandLab Tips, which is over 400 pages for that program.
When do you sleep? When do you
Well, a lot of this, if you want 3 more minutes, I'll tell you something I also think is kind of important.
Go ahead. If you've got it, I've got it.
Yeah, no, I only take 5 minutes to set up.
All right.
It's very important to have everything be multi-purpose. Everything has to be multi-purpose. So I got a Line 6 Helix because I was reviewing it for Harmony Central. I was doing like an extensive review of it. Plus, Line 6 stuff is generally pretty darn good, so I was curious to check it out. And so I started coming up with presets for myself. And I went to Line 6 and I said, I'll trade you the presets for the Helix. And they said, well, we'll trade you continuing to come up with presets for the Helix, but we want you to be on a marketplace that we're starting. So it's like, okay, make presets, keep a Helix, and make some money. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So I've actually contributed a fair amount to them in terms of feedback on future versions and things like that. So it's been a good relationship, and the presets went up there. And again, people are hearing the music that was done with the presets. That's actually putting some money in the bank. It's not a huge amount, but lots of little things add up to something substantial. So I try to get as much use out of everything as I possibly can. Like when I'll review a keyboard, and just as a courtesy, in the process of reviewing it, I will come up with presets. You know? And even if I don't particularly want the keyboard, I'll just give them to the manufacturer and say, hey, thanks for letting me check this out. Here's your keyboard back, and here's some presets I came up with. And Roland took a whole bunch of those presets and just put them online, which is great. But that also started a relationship with Roland. They're like, oh, he's the guy who does the good presets. Maybe we should talk to him about, or manuals. Like sometimes I'll write a review of something and a company will say, God, he explained this better than we did. I wonder if he writes manuals. Yeah, I've written a lot of manuals in my time for those reasons. And then in the process of doing the manuals, you never know what's going to happen. I wrote the manual for the Emulator 2, which EMU put out. And this was just when MIDI was happening. So I was privy to the development of the Emulator 2 because they wanted the manual to come out at the same time, which meant that I could, and they were implementing MIDI in that. So I was able to talk to the people who were doing the actual MIDI, and they were explaining to me how it worked and what they did and the constraints. And I was able to write MIDI for musicians based on doing the manual for the emulator too, because they basically educated me about MIDI beyond just bits and bytes, practical applications and how you'd use this stuff and all that. So then the MIDI for Musicians book came out, and that led to doing seminars on MIDI, and that led to more books, which, it's just, the more things you can get out of anything that you do. If you're going to be playing a gig live, bring a video recorder, take a video of it. The other thing is that there's no reason, if you have a band, video's a great thing to do, but record the sound separately and fly it into a video program like Vegas, which is like designed for musicians. So you have your video footage, you sync the audio to it so that the audio is good, and then you can also have 2 iPhones with background stuff, and whenever there's something wrong or a transition doesn't make it, you have B-roll, and so now you've got a video you can put online, and it's your calling card, and people want to know what you sound like at gigs. You say, well, go to this link, so but that's what I mean about marketing. Gotcha. That's why marketing, so you got to get your name out there, because if people don't know you exist, you're not going to be asked to do anything. And the noise level is outrageous these days.
Yeah. Well, the Craig Anderton, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Thanks, Ty.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. If you want to see the entire Craig Anderton uncut interview, as well as all of the other uncut interviews from this weekend, throw us a buck on Patreon, patreon.com/lordsofthetrident, and you get access to everything. And we will be back with more interviews here at Between the Waves Madison, btwmadison.com. Keep watching. We'll see you next time.